Hello, I'm going to come to you today with a bit of a different kind of review for me of Inferno, a 2010 novel by Lean Miles. They are a poet, and this is a poet's novel. I have had this on my bookshelves for the longest of times, and I thought I would try and do something different because it is a poet's novel. The words that they use are it's very much feels like a poet's novel, not in the kind of flowery words, but just in kind of how things bounce back and forth and things like that. I wanted to kind of bring that to you, so I thought I'd use a Dane Reed's method of sort of tabbing out stuff. For me, it's dog earing. Oh, terrible dog earing stuff. I thought I'd read those out to you. I should probably start off by saying that Eileen Miles used to go by her, she, her, but has switched in, I think, about in their 60s. She's now in her 70s to they, them. But, the back of this book, the description is from its beginning to its end, Miles's chronicle transmits an energy and vividness that will not soon leave its reader. Her story of a young female writer discovering both her sexuality and her own creative drive in the meditative and raucous environment that was New York City in its punk and indie heyday is engrossing, poignant, and funny. So at this point, they were identifying as she, her, but that has shifted. So throughout the things that I read, there may be references to she, her. It is a novel of an Eileen Miles, who I guess is fictitious, though many of the names that seem to come up in the novel, including her own, are quite real. And you have the fun of going through Wikipedia to find various names that show up and go, oh, these are actual people. It's very so it's fictionalized in that kind of closely corresponding to the poet's life, perhaps. You know, you can only treat it like a novel, and that's, I guess, how I'm treating it. So yeah, let's get on with just a couple of things. Let's start off with the very first lines. The very first lines. My English professor's ass was so beautiful. It was perfect and full as she stood at the board writing some important word. Reality or perhaps illusion. She opened the door. With each movement of her arms and her hand, delicately but forcefully inscribing the letters intended for our eyes, her ass shook, ever so slightly. I had never learned from a woman with a body before. Something slow, horrible, and glowing was happening inside me. I stood on the foothills to heaven. She opened the door. And yeah, we're getting that right at the very first line, that kind of the tension, the marriage of mind and body, of learning and also noticing her their teachers his I their teacher's ass, I guess, is how I'll put it. I am going to struggle with pronouns in this. I know I will, and please forgive me right off the bat. Um, my family was like living with cruel cats. Some would turn as you entered a room. Oh, it's you. Yeah, so this is that transition point of their life, where going from being living at home to transitioning to being an adult out in the world. Um, there is a really kind of striking point with this teacher, that the teacher is teaching them Dante's Inferno, and she gets all the students to write their Inferno, and Eileen is the only one who writes a poem, and she says, "Oh," and the teacher notices this and reads it out loud, and that leads to, I don't remember her reading. I remember her reading me. I remember her reading my poem. I remember her holding something I wrote, a gleaming page, mine, that rolled out of the sad typewriter on the kitchen table at 33 Swan Place. My father had given us that typewriter. It wasn't even mine yet. It was ours, the family. It would be mine when I left home. I was already gone. I would take it with me, but everyone sat in class now, listened while Eva Nelson, the teacher, stood there and read my Inferno. The waves rolled on, and indeed, there's that sense of this inferno that we're getting here is Eileen Miles's inferno, their hell, as it was. Uh, uh, when Eileen is out in the world, uh, she's a struggling poet, no money. And there's some kind of hard economic consequences of being poor, of being a female being poor in the city. Uh, 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 where is it? Okay. Um, but I'm female, so there was an added bit of danger. People always attacked me with. Like I would find myself alone and something bad would happen. Nothing did, of course, but economically I was pretty naked. Once people saw how broke I was, they decided I was for sale. And indeed, she falls in with a woman, Rita, who is a sex worker, is a prostitute or a whore, which is the label that gets used here. And this first section of the novel seems to be about, the different paths. Am I going to be a poet? Am I going to be a whore? Or something like that. Am I going to be someone who's creating, or am I going to be an object? Um, I wrote constantly, and I was learning all the time, and I was always meeting people who were poets, mainly men, and they wouldn't tell me, and they would. Let's try that again. I wrote constant. So there's also just being a female poet amongst all these male poets. I wrote constantly and was learning all the time. And I was always meeting people who were poets, mainly men. And they would tell me what to read. And I would go, huh, and decide myself what I actually liked. And I could decide, happily alone in the 6 inches between my eyes and the pages of a book. I had largely been cut out for this life. So, already early, decide, that independence coming in there. Uh, um, Now, in my first couple of years, and here's more about that in independence. Now, in my first couple of years in New York, I did not go to the library anymore, and pretty much never would again, nor had I installed a small building inside myself. Yet, I needed it in my head, that quiet, lurid feeling that grew and shrunk in relation to the beat of words on a page. I liked to pen pen. I enjoyed a long yellow legal pad and the shaky din of a manual typewriter. But these conditions had not exactly taken shape. I had not been in a groove long enough with my materials to feel I was on a road. Sliding down a dune, feeling the warm sand, looking up at the sky, the blasting white sun, with the windows open, the poem flapping out of a typewriter in front of me. I made this. I am free. I had a room. So you do get a sense of that kind of poet's rhythm to her prose, that we're flicking back and forth from, she's in a room to suddenly she's sliding down a dune to then she's back in a room with the window open and the poem flapping out of the typewriter in front of me. It's got that lovely thing of like, I'm not going to be constrained, don't have to be constrained to one scene, that kind of very imagistic kind of feel to her storytelling. There's a fairly long section of her talking about kind of the poetry scene and the poetry reading and the kind of the which I didn't like at all. That I didn't appeal to me at all. It seemed it felt really grubby to me, or it just felt really depressing, and I don't think I tabbed any of it. Um, yeah, yeah. So that's something to just to say where I didn't read. Um, there is a thing here of like, there's that idea of like, people kind of clawing over each other, and I remember a guy telling me once that all his friends were writers, that he made friends with writers he admired. This same guy later married Paul Blackburn's wife, his widow. I was shocked. It all seemed wrong. Anything that wasn't just totally accidental seemed wrong to me. I had just moved from Arlington. Isn't that using people? Isn't it bad? And that kind of that sort of sense of uh you know people just using each other is just like it seemed to be kind of like the antithetical thing to poetry, though of course it's completely human and common, so I guess it's everywhere, including the poetical world, but still seems kind of gross. um the poets, here's her on the poet's life. uh Here's them on the poet's life. The poet's life is just so much crenulated waste, nights and days whipping swiftly or laboriously past the cinematic window. We're hunching and weaving over the keys of our green of our The poet's life is just so much crenulated waste, nights and days whipping swiftly or laboriously past the cinematic window. We're hunched and weaving over the keys of our green, our gray, or pink blue manual typewriter, maybe a darker stone, cold, authoritative selectric with its orgasmic expectant hum, and us popping pills and laughing over what you or I just wrote, wondering if that line means insult or sex, or both, usually both. I even read that. Theoretically, this all gets edited down into a wonderful video. Um, I read this book called Hunger by a Scandinavian writer named Knut Hamsun. He would just walk around Bergen, chasing some girl in a red dress with big fat braids. Something drove men, and meanwhile they wrote about it. It seemed like nothing mattered, but it was more absurd to do something than plain old existentialism. It would be embarrassing behavior if the person was real, but he wasn't. He was a writer. The character was going to starve unless he made money on his art, which was basically my ideal. Nobody ever told me how to live. They told me what not to do. In all these books about the lives of artists that I read, I mean, they weren't guidebooks, but they took the simple belief in art and freedom and they carried them to outrageous lengths. I could do that. Before I could write, before I even knew how to spell, I went out with my best friend Billy LeBlanc and we created a bunch of letters out of symbols we knew. Sun, wave, stick. We made letters. We had so much to say to everybody, and we pronounced our ideas carefully with crayons and paper, and we folded them up and placed them in one mailbox on a house on our street. We were so excited because the silence of our childhood was over. We wrote. We sat on the sidewalk outside of that house. We anticipated a response. We waited and waited. Then we simply forgot. But that sun, the first tiny symbol, still sits there, blazing in my head, which is like, that's a writer right there. Sun blazing in my head. That's the symbol of the sun. Let's put the focus on. Yeah, and so like at the end of this section, we kind of have a sort of a building thing to her thing of like, what life path am I going to take, and and I guess her coming to face with the thing of, getting paid to of them getting paid to have sex with men, or getting paid for the poetry, getting paid for the creative work. Um, and there's a thing here of at a masseuse's job. Um, I was her little nurse standing to her left. We were hip to hip, pumping away. Oh, yes, yes, he went. Then she went down on him. Oh no, I thought. It was like the contents of my brain turned inside out. I can't give blowjobs for a living. I can't do this. I've got to go, I said. Hold on, Don. That's the name of the guy. She said, is there something wrong? She had me pinned between the little door to the other room and this room. I'm okay. I just have to go. I can't do this. She said, oh, baby, and put her arms around me. I'm standing there in a towel. Do you like girls? She said, holding me close. I did. And that kind of, that kind of, that and another scene at a hotel with this friend Rita is another thing about that. Is another is another thing about that. Actually, and then we kind of contrast that with her thinking about language, and I would lie on my back in the dark, keep nudging them, them being words, nudging words for a joke. She's actually thinking about. It seemed like it was about being tight, making the words fit so good that before you knew what they meant, the opposite thing had happened. A joke got there before anything else because it was going the wrong way. The words were. They slapped you right in the face. In the face, they were so grand. I heard cars from Mexico are getting across the border by turning their lights out and coming in backwards and fast. People always look like you hit them before they laughed, and it was the moment that I love to get, without violence. I would never hit a face, yet I wanted it to be an open moment, just for me. Yet I wanted it to be open, a moment, just for me. So yeah, we get that contrasted with her date. She and Rita's gone off with her date. She's gone into a room with theirs, and Atalito was kissing any girl on the bed, and it seemed that this would pass. The non-event of sex with an adult stranger putting his soft, drunken tongue in my mouth. Somehow we got our clothes off, and I actually think got under the covers. In retrospect, it was like married sex. The ribbony silk that trimmed the blanket and the dryness of the clean sheets were my friend's. His hands moved aimlessly along my body, touching my ordinary female chest. My breasts weren't large, but I had never wished they were. I had no sympathy for his possible disappointment. I was the body he'd been paying for all night. It wasn't like he bought me. He rented me. Actually, I should just read that. Yeah. I was the body he'd been paying for all night. It wasn't like he bought me. He rented me. Yeah. She sort of describes having sex with this guy. We grunted and plunged, I think, not for long. I think I allowed and even enjoyed in that I was a witness to my body taking part in an animal unknown, having made a deal as if I were my father and had sold my daughter in exchange for some furs and a bottle of wine. I wasn't so much in season as drifting through the yard, and the thought grew brighter in my father's head. Why not her? I am that one. So again, there's a kind of like a massive kind of just dissociation that seems to happen around this thing, which um, afterwards, in the next morning, she just sort of observes him having kind of a quiet moment looking out a window. They and She ends up not actually even asking for money. He just looked sad and looking out over this city that wasn't his. He was Northern Italian. It was so far away. He looked back at me for a moment and gave me a little pirate grin. "Hey," he said in his quick Italian, and then he returned to his smoke. "I started to get dressed. I didn't ask for it. I said 'hey' and got dressed. I left him in the window just like that. I left him alone with his view." It's like, uh, stepped out of his, and also stepped out of his view, as like stepping out of being an object. Um, and this is her hell. You can tell that this is the inferno part of this of this book. If this book is going to be structured like Dante, this is stepping out of the hell. It's kind of also probably significant that this fellow that she's having sex with in a hotel for money, or under the promise of money, is Italian, and we're talking about Inferno and an Italian poet, Dante, and what is she stepping out of? She's stepping out of some middle-aged guy's um, fantasy life and into her own life, their own life, is stepping into their own life. All right, I will stop there. That's the first segment. I don't know how this is going to go. I'm going to have to edit this down to hell if I actually do it this way. But it's actually nice reading the words out loud, even if I only keep this for myself and just do a more traditional review later. That's the first half. That's the first third of Inferno, a poet's novel by Eileen Myles, their book. More videos later.